Well, welcome to our afternoon session. Hope everyone's enjoying the conference so far. We wanted to just go ahead and dive right in. And I thought one thing that would be helpful is just to do some quick context for the panelists so they can, you know where they're coming from when we dive into our conversation about the dire teacher shortage that we're facing and what we're going to do about it. So I will go ahead and give you two quick sentences on me, and then we'll ask our panelists to chime in. So I'm Doug Scott. I'm a senior expert in McKinsey's education practice. I've been in education for 20-something years. And my first entree into education was when I joined the New Teacher Project, which is now TNTP. And we were really worried about the upcoming teacher shortage. So we can see that we haven't solved that problem yet, and I'm excited to be diving into that with all of you. With that, I'll turn it over to Alix.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Alix Guerrier. I am the incoming new CEO of DonorsChoose, a nonprofit giving platform that supports teacher projects around the country. My career includes, is also sort of 20 plus years in education, including as a classroom teacher. I worked with Doug at McKinsey in the education practice, co-founded an edtech startup called LearnZillion, which was acquired by Kinsey's company, and then spent 3 years as CEO of international development giving platform, Global Giving, before making this shift. And this is my first event, so thank you for giving me my debut.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Susan Enfield. I'm currently in my 10th year serving as superintendent for Highline Public Schools, richly diverse system just south of Seattle, Washington. But I began my career as a high school English journalism and ELL teacher, and I keep my California teaching credential current at all times, so I may be part of the solution for the teacher shortage at some point if the superintendent thing doesn't work out.
Susan, you get job offers out there right now. My name is Wendy. I started teaching in 1991. My background includes K-12 administration. I have a PhD in curriculum and instruction with research interests in culturally sustaining pedagogies. I'm particularly interested in making sure that we have a teaching force that represents the students in the classrooms. Right now, I work with an organization that supports alternative certification, continuing education for license renewal, and then the teaching channel with its video platform to help us during times like the pandemic when we can't get into schools in the old way. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kinsey Rawe. I am the Senior Vice President of Courseware and Instructional Services at Imagine Learning. Basically, when we started our instructional services group 10 years ago, we were looking to provide support with teachers to virtual schools. 10 years later, we have about 1,400 teachers. With the pandemic, a lot of virtual going on, but even more on the teacher shortage front. We saw this coming probably 5-6 years ago. It really started to ramp up, and it's interesting to see it from the other side with the district's pains and challenges. Glad to be here. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Cummings. I'm the Chief Academic Officer at Teachers Pay Teachers, and that is a role I have after 30 years of teaching and being a principal and an assistant superintendent in K-12 education. And now we get to serve 85% of teachers in the United States and most of the teachers in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, not just with a robust marketplace, but with digital tools and a school access subscription and a vibrant community that cares about sharing collective wisdom. And I think that honoring our teachers and connecting them with each other and a collaborative community is one of the things we'll be talking about today.
For sure.
Glad to be here.
So thank you, guys. And now you know a little bit more about us, and I think that'll help frame the conversation. Now I want to know a little bit more about you guys in the room. So a lot of former teachers on stage. I'd love to see show of hands in the audience. Who in the audience is a former or current teacher?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, now keep the hands up. If you have your hand up, would you recommend teaching to a friend? Okay, so therein lies part of the problem. We're seeing some of those hands go down, and in fact, a recent survey by Teachers Pay Teachers, only 31% of current teachers would actually recommend it to someone else. right? So we wonder why we have a shortage when only a third of teachers would recommend it to their colleagues. So a few things that I would highlight just again to dimension where we are. We're going to start a little bit with where we are and how we got here, then try to move more into where we should be going and how all of us can take action to get there. So a few more stats just to put this in perspective. In 2018, the Learning Policy Institute estimated 100,000 teacher shortage in the country. In 2022, 44% of schools reported a vacancy, and 61% of those said it was COVID related. So imagine how many kids are in that classroom that doesn't have a teacher, that someone is improvising or trying to solve for that problem. And we all know which schools are probably more profoundly affected by those gaps. And the NEA did a poll where 55% of teachers have indicated that they plan to leave the profession earlier than they had planned otherwise. And this is a problem that's been brewing. If we look historically, if you look at teacher prep programs, they're down enrollment-wise 18% since 2010. And another indicator is the interest in Teach for America, which is down to 2,000 placements, which is a third fewer than in 2019 and is 2/3 fewer than their high water mark in 2013. So a lot of problems. And so if we think we've got a problem now, it sounds like we've got an even bigger problem on the way. So I'm going to start with you, Susan, given you see this day in and day out in Highline. Tell us what this feels like as a district leader and in the district to have this kind of profound challenges with teacher shortages and with teachers on the job being stressed the way they are.
Yeah, so, nobody ever went into teaching thinking it was going to be an easy gig. So we all go into it knowing that it's going to be a challenge. Clearly, the last couple of years have provided us challenges that we couldn't have anticipated. We actually, in Highline, we do have certain sort of areas that are hard to fill. It's hard to find teachers for special education, for dual language, but for the most part, we haven't felt the pinch just yet. I think part of that is I do think there are things that districts can do to make their systems more appealing for teachers to come and stay. You want a couple just real quick ones? So I think one of the most important things I do as a superintendent is hire principals. And research is clear, and teachers will tell you, it's having a great principal who knows instruction, who supports them, who creates a culture of collaboration and respect and appreciation, they will stay there. And so it's one of the highest leverage things I do as a leader is to hire great principals. And of my 35 schools, 34 of those principals are my placement or my hire, because I take that very seriously. And then I also think, too, we are very, very clear in Highline about who we are and what we stand for. And I think that helps with recruitment. So we have, and those of my friends in the audience know, we have our Highline promise to know every student by name, strength, and need, so they graduate prepared for the future they choose, which is, I think, the best definition of equity that I've ever really heard. And people want to come be a part of that. And so I think that we've helped create a place where teachers want to come. Now, we are hearing from folks that we are going to start feeling the pinch from the teacher shortage, and I think we're going to talk about what we can do about that, but yeah.
What are others of you seeing as you engage with teachers in your different roles?
My side hobby, I can't leave the classroom really, but I teach at the University of Virginia School of Education and Human Development, and every semester the classes are getting smaller. The traditional classes are getting smaller. The non-traditional classes are getting bigger. We have districts now who are sending cohorts through to take courses like cross-cultural education. And I think as great as the challenges are right now, it is telling us we've got to break some things apart. But we want to stay in current state for the moment.
Yes.
What else are we seeing?
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that statistic. 31% of teachers recommending the profession to others coming into it. We went into the job because we wanted to change the world, and education has the power to do that. Thinking about those conditions that need to be present to recruit and retain the next generation of teachers is really, really important. We're hearing from teachers that they would 48% or 55% want to leave the profession potentially, that it's not just teachers, it's administrators too. And so those really important leaders that you're talking about, Susan, need support as well.
So what I thought we were in a pandemic and then we were going to reimagine things and it was going to be totally different afterwards. What happened?
Not much. I mean, in all seriousness, there was a lot of talk at the start of the pandemic that we weren't going to go back to normal. We were going to transform. We were going to change things. And I have yet to find a K-12 system in this country that's transformed. I think we've gone exactly back to what we were doing before, and I think that's a part of the problem, that we do have to start looking at what our school systems need to be moving forward, because they can't stay in current state, in my opinion. And so as I think I was talking with Michelle before, we are in the very beginning of a multi-year recovery effort that, if we're smart, we will pair with real innovation and meaningful change for how we educate kids in this country.
So on the topic of back to normal, I have a lot to say about back to normal, because there's never been an era where there is back to normal, right? I mean, 2022 is not going to be like 2018, because 2018 was not like 2014, right? So pandemic or no, we always move forward. Part of what I think the pandemic really, and the last 2 years really has revealed, is that a lot of these problems were there before. I mean, the way that it feels like to me is that in a large part, the system was sort of in starvation mode. And I mean that sort of at a high level and very specifically, operating in starvation mode, when, and that's not a mode that can withstand a stress. And so a huge stress, really the most imaginable stress, comes by, and you see the system collapse. Clawing your way back to starvation mode is not a path to recovery. It doesn't even get you back to where you were before. And that's actually what inertia is sort of pointed to right now, I think, for the system at large.
No, Alex, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, basically, all of a sudden the pandemic comes along, great resignation all across the country, teachers singled out in this profession. But we want to act like this is a pandemic-driven issue, that teachers are all of a sudden stressed and disrespected and having to do 15 different jobs. And the reality is exactly what you said, that this has been a long, ongoing problem, largely due to either virus-induced, attempts to bring change to the industry, or other very intentional attempts to bring NCLB, things before that, et cetera. And the problem really resides with the failure to understand that if we don't reshape teaching, that's largely stayed the same over the past 40 years or more, then we're not going to be able to revolutionize things. So the pandemic is a sort of progressive pushing us towards the future in and of itself, and it says a lot if a worldwide virus can't actually bring about substantial change, that education is very monolithic, and we need to continue to rethink how we do that in a more intentional way.
I have a slightly different response to your question. I think things are changing, and I think the question is, are we going to swing back to the way that things were, or is this a moment to accelerate change? I think the conversation, the actions around increased equity are huge. I think the use of technology is extraordinary. Pre-pandemic, our surveys suggested that teachers were not at all comfortable using technology. The most recent TPT State of Education report, over 70% said they were comfortable using technology to personalize learning. I had never seen numbers like that.
Of course, I might suggest they're lying about that.
Oh, now, I'm seeing a trend.
But Susan, we were talking earlier about the move going back to normal, but I think the other challenge, there's not just challenge of more expectations of teachers, but in some ways expectations on the system that may not go away, right? You guys have had to cope with so much more, and now that those more go away, now you have even more things on your to-do list.
Well, and here's the thing, as I said in the beginning, teaching has never been easy. And so I don't think what we should be doing is, how do we make teaching easier? How do we make it more appealing? And I think that what we need to not lose sight of, and we really need to really zero in on, is what fundamentally motivates the vast majority of people to go into teaching? They want to make an impact in the lives of children. And one of the things that has happened as a result of the pandemic is they have been pulled in so many different directions that they're not feeling that impact. That, I think, is one of the biggest things that's really challenging folks to stay in the profession. And so one of the things that I've been reflecting on recently is that when we talk about funding education, in the same breath, we have to talk about funding the social service agencies that are in our communities, because right now, we are asking a lot of our teaching staff, a lot of our teaching staff. And I can tell you, and I had never done this experiment in real life, maybe one day, but you can line up 100 teachers, and I'll say, behind this curtain, I have $10,000 more. But let's face it, $10,000 more will not make a material difference in your daily experience as a teacher, your working conditions. But behind this curtain, I have a full-time social worker, a full-time school psychologist, a full-time counselor, a full-time family liaison. I can tell you where they're going to go. So I really do think that, and I know that people don't want to say it's not all about money. It's not all about money. But if we are putting the staffing in place so that our teachers can really do the work that they love, I think we won't have some of the challenges that we're talking about now and keeping them. I think that's a big part of it. And by the way, we're also creating a really self-fulfilling narrative. When was the last time that you were part of a conversation where we talked about the joys of the teaching profession? It is a joyous profession.
You actually get picked on right now if you try to remind people that there are some joys in teaching, like you're insensitive or you're not in touch with the challenges that people are facing. There are still great moments happening. There are wins happening every day. There are connections being made. There's knowledge being applied. There's higher order thinking.
So change the narrative.
Good.
Wendy, that's true. And teachers, I don't know if you all are on Reddit, but there's a great teacher subreddit. And one of the teachers said, it's the door principle. I feel joy with all the interactions that happen on this side of the classroom door. And it is the external pressures that, some of which you're talking about, the incredible social emotional needs of students and families, the politicization of curriculum that are causing the burnout. And the burnout is real.
Alix, did you want to hop in?
Well, I wanted to first agree sort of vehemently with what Susan was saying, but also to the point to say that those two doors that you outlined, let's actually do both of those. Right? Let's provide the wraparound, and let's also give the $10,000. I can say things out loud that we all
You're a cake and eat it too.
Yeah, cake and eat it too. Here's a sentence that we all know is true, right? Teachers spend hundreds of dollars out of their own pocket on it, right? Thousands now, right? And so this is a thing that we know is true. We've been saying it for decades, and it's sort of something that we've become acclimatized to, but it is literally shocking if you think about it. If you sort of just take your mind out of the sector and then come back and say, we actually expect every teacher to spend $1,000 out of their own pocket for basic stuff. And, this is actually something that we have some visibility into at DonorsChoose. And, we've been able to watch, like over the pandemic, the requests go from supplemental supplies to, health, PPE, seating arrangements. Okay, so that's good. It's good to fund that, but teachers have to come to DonorsChoose, a third-party private nonprofit, to get these most basic needs met. And it's unconscionable, isn't it? It's unconscionable. So if that's not a big part of this, then it must be a big part of this.
Can you share your stat on that one?
Yeah. So let me just remind everybody that I am new to DonorsChoose. I'm in my third week, and this is really important because that way I get this sort of everything that I get wrong and don't know. But I've been on a learning journey. So some of my learning journey in coming in was the team was telling me about the fact that control for everything that you can imagine. Okay, just control for everything that you're going to imagine. Getting a fully funded project on DonorsChoose, on average about $1,000, has a 22% increase in retention, okay? Teacher retention for the year. 22% increase in teacher retention. So that's a massive, I didn't believe it either when I first, but now I believe it. I'm just believe it.
I got to push on that.
Yeah, so you may want to push on it, but the reason is, it's actually directly related to what I was just talking about. These are teachers that are clawing either out of their own wallet for the most basic things. And once you provide those basic things, you've made a material, huge difference in their ability to run the class that they want to run it safely, and to teach what they want. So, so this is something that we're proud about, but it's also a little bit of a indictment on the system, right? That we can have that impact.
correlation versus causation.
Yeah,
I would just suggest
You and I will be
that
talking
in
afterwards.
the environment where we are right now, to know that there's a statistic like that there's a correlation between
Causative,
teachers who
though,
who know how to advocate for themselves and get what they need for the classrooms, that there's a relation to retention. We need to be in the conversations we're in here at this conference so that we can get that information to the educators. So okay, correlation, causation, I'll leave that one as a
it's
question
actually
mark.
correct. But sorry, but it's actually controlled for teachers posting projects.
I haven't seen the study.
Yeah, so this is due to.
But this is also a leadership issue, because I'm sorry, because if a teacher, if a teacher wants to do something on DonorsChoose to get individual robots to do some cool, that's one thing. But if a teacher's going on for basic supplies, that's a leadership failure. So if a teacher emails me and says, I don't have this, I get it to them that day. Do you know what I mean? And by the way, they shouldn't have to ask, but things happen, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that I think is really, we've got to push on our systems leaders and say, you've got to give people the basic tools to do their job. They shouldn't be going to DonorsChoose to get chairs.
Yeah. Well, so I want to move into so what do we do? Two quick observations. One is that fact has stuck, and we can debate the causation correlation.
Alix, Alix, are you all right?
And we only have 19 minutes left, though, so I'm not sure if we could get through it. But one thing that stuck with me, too, is there is a fundamental, the dollars part of that. I've also been just stuck in my head, how much of it is someone external to that building valuing what that teacher's doing, saying they appreciate their work, and that teacher having discretion over $1,000. Because if the district budget increased $1,000 per teacher per school, but the teacher didn't have a say in how that was spent, it's a different.
And also, I think I'd be interested how much sort of socioeconomic information you have on these DonorsChoose awards. I think sort of at a micro level, my suspicion is most of these are not coming from urban and rural school districts. And one of the big problems, and what kind of is frustrating to me, is it's sort of taken a pandemic, it's taken sort of a new strong look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, among other things, to actually realize that this has been a huge problem well before, and some of it caused by programs, but a lot of it caused by the fact that we've kind of swept under the rug the idea that teachers aren't working in urban schools, Title I schools, rural schools, and this has been a known problem, and kind of, we've always had this issue. But now, kind of like the opioid crisis in America, drugs were always bad until they reached the suburbs, and now we're having discussion. So if anything comes out of this, I hope first in line for some of these solutions are the ones who are not going to likely get $1,000 increase in the school budget to give supplies and so on.
Yeah, I wanted to build on what you all are saying. Similar to your data, we have a similar statistic for school access subscriptions. So if a principal's going to leadership, gives teachers the trust and the autonomy to have access to supplemental curriculum and agreements about what accountability looks like, they are more likely to remain in that school with that leader. And there are, to your point, Doug, conditions that leaders create and that the community creates that create that virtuous cycle and that community that allows teaching to be joyous. Yeah.
So I want to. So we've sort of started this conversation. Imagine we're back on stage in 10 years and we've cracked this problem, right? We're here talking about, remember the teacher shortage and how we've changed things and made it better for teachers and for students. What do we do? What are the things that have to change in order for us to be in that place?
Well, I think that I said it earlier. We've got to staff our schools appropriately, right? And if the right staff is in a school to allow teachers to do their job, that's going to be huge. And right now we don't do that. And in fact, I've challenged some funders. I said, here's what would be great if a funder would say, tell us what the positions are that need to be in place in a school, right? All the ones I mentioned and probably more. And invest in doing that in a school keep the investment for about 3 to 5 years and see what you get. Let's create a proof point that shows that if we do that, I think things will change. And I also think we need to take control of that narrative and stop this, to your point, I think we can acknowledge the challenges and still amplify the joy that comes with teaching, and tell young people, why, and remember too that, the people who choose to go into teaching aren't doing it to make $1 million, right? Nobody ever did that. They are going to work, insane hours. They are going to spend money out of their own pocket. That's always been, and to a point, that's okay. But now it's getting, really out of hand. So I think staffing is a huge thing. I think a conversation that focuses on how great it is to be a teacher is another. And frankly, I'll go on the third rail issue here right now. I think we have to have some really honest conversations with our union leadership around some of the things in our collective bargaining agreements that are not helpful. And so I will give an example, and this is being filmed, so heaven only knows what's going to happen to me now, because I've had this conversation before.
You got the teaching certificate currently.
Well, yeah, I've got the teaching certificate. Yeah, exactly. But one of the things too that we are not, so there's just the overall teacher shortage, but then there's also the lack of diversity in the profession that we need to address. And so in Highline, we have made a real effort over the last few years to diversify our workforce. And we've done a pretty good job. We've increased the diversity of our workforce about 40%, which is a good start. But because of things like a seniority clause, when my enrollment's going down, and newsflash, everyone's enrollment is going down, who are the first teachers that I have to let go? I shouldn't say younger, newer, thank you. I caught myself before. So my newer teachers. So now we're creating this churn that, Highline isn't a hospitable place for staff of color, right? So this is a problem, and our kids aren't getting the teachers in front of them they need and deserve. But those are hard conversations to have. And I think we've got to all summon some collective courage to put those things on the table. And I'm not saying I'm not I will walk through fire for my teachers. I am pro-teacher, I am supportive of my union, but everything has to be on the table right now. Nothing can be sort of a sacred cow. And we've got to have that conversation around, are there things that we could change? And we actually did put some language in our last agreement that creates some parameters so that we don't lose them. But I think it's not just overall teachers, it's the diversity of the workforce that we're also really feeling the pain right now too.
I'd do another third rail and say that we have to rethink state testing. I mean, how we go about all of that. Right now, teachers are not incented to innovate. They're not incented to think outside the box. They're incented to make sure the kids pass the various state exams. So coming out of the pandemic, where we've had the ability to waive some of these testing requirements, moving forward with a more thoughtful approach around what it means to measure growth across broad spectrums of schools and students is going to be critical to allow teachers to really start to rethink what we're doing in education.
I'll add in your sort of 10 years forward successful timeline. Another thing, I think this builds on something that you brought up earlier, Kinsey. In that timeline, we will be patting ourselves on the back for having halted the intense political warfare that we're conducting through our schools. So I would, most of us in here, I think, are people, not politicians. And so, this comes down to us, regardless of what your leaning is or ideology, I think, I'll just assert that the use of schools as a battleground for the warfare between two political cartels is toxic. It's toxic to the teaching profession. It's toxic to students. And in this successful timeline, we would have found some way to block it.
Plus one to what's been said, I'm going to take on compensation because I will yes and you, Susan, and say, yes, it's important to be valued and have resources. It's also important to honor teachers and expertise and compensate them for what they bring. And TPT has distributed $1 billion to teachers since its inception because we believe that collective wisdom matters and it makes a difference for children's lives. And the second thing I would say, my daughters are 23 and 27, and they are not interested in the kinds of strict timelines and bell schedules that they experienced in high school or that I lived in for 30 years as an educator. The next generation of teachers wants voice, choice, and agency in decision-making in schools, in the exciting, multidisciplinary curriculum that they can create. And we need to change the world of work for teachers to recognize that need for collaboration and flexibility.
Doug, I've got a yes and.
That's great. We're like an improv group up here. That's fine. Yes, and.
The year's 2032, and we've done some really great things in policy. It's not common for an 18-year-old to head off to undergrad right now knowing that they want to become a teacher. We have people older with different kinds of responsibilities, different financial means, different demands on their time, who are interested in going into education, but they can't stop their lives and pause their income and take on debt. There are alternative certification providers who can help us address the teacher shortage in meaningful ways. When I bake cookies, I follow the recipe on the bag of the chocolate chips. My cookies are still homemade. There are grow your own models out there for us to take the paraprofessionals, the substitutes, the other people committed to our communities, and grow what we need at home. We can have our homemade programs following the recipe, but there are policies in place right now that prevent us from opening the doors and unlocking the system that rewards the old way. So 2032, we've made some phone calls as a community of people who want something better for the students who are in schools right now, not some vague, future, fuzzy, next generation policy.
So I'm going to join the third rail club here real quick and help me. You guys got to bail me out then. So I appreciate all the broader reach of programs, and having worked at the New Teacher Project, alternative certification is something I've seen be really powerful, but it also can lead to the observation, are we watering down the profession?
No.
Okay, next
question. Anyone who wants to talk to me about an alt cert that's CAPE accredited, that is not diluting rigor, that is being held voluntarily, asking to be evaluated, the same criteria that we are all in love with, it's there.
Yep. So how do we demonstrate that it's actually strengthening the profession through growing it, through diversifying it?
Sure. The data's there in diversity, retention, and this grow your own, people that know the community.
Okay. We've got a few more minutes. So what can people, you guys articulated what's going to take to get there. What are a few of the actions that folks in the room can take?
We're at a tech conference, so I'm going to lay out a couple of thoughts about technology. You plus one that. Technology can be used in the teaching profession to automate some systems that teachers shouldn't have to engage in. And we should get way better at auto-grading, at administrative tasks. We should be able to serve up to administrators data on student performance and teacher performance that makes them smarter faster so that they can give better support. We need to realize that students can learn from anywhere, from anyone, anywhere in the world at any time. And our schools don't yet reflect that reality, and technology can help us get there. And likewise, this idea of internships and apprenticeships to build pipelines for teachers is extremely exciting. And what about for students? What about thinking about flexible time? Our colleagues at Big Picture Learning have students out in internships 2 days a week sometimes. We can do more to create relevance and engagement and flexibility within a school schedule.
Yeah, just to add to your technology comment, as a ed tech representative up here and at an ed tech conference, there's probably 3 or 4 businesses that do one of the things that you're talking about, another 3 or 4 that do other elements. There's a lot out there where we are failing as an industry is kind of where the universities and other educational systems are failing the teachers at the beginning, which is really showing them how to use it in a non-stressful way, in a manner in which teachers don't feel like they've got to fit it in amongst preparing students for the standardized tests. Giving them the tools, both automated and professional development, in a sort of bite-sized, easy-to-consume way. Because even the digital natives who do come in and are your daughter's ages, they're coming in knowing how to use phones and other things for their personal, but they have no idea how to make that work in a classroom. And we, as an industry, do not do a super great job of helping them on that path.
I see friends like edweb.net, maybe check out how to make PD flexible for teachers so that they can take care of the school day and take care of themselves when it's the right time and the right bite size. We've learned over the past 2 years how to use video for coaching and feedback. We can calibrate ourselves using effectiveness tools and instruments so that we can support our teachers better and become that administrator that's behind the other door and provide the support that keeps people in the profession. We've learned some things over the past 2 years, and Michelle, I'm hopeful and feeling positive about some of those things too, but let's be smart about it and carry the right things forward.
I was going to ask, so I don't want to, I am interrupting the flow. So I hear what you guys are saying about data to improve, and I recall we had a great panel yesterday. Marguerite Rosa was talking about data to support improvement versus data that's all about accountability. And as you guys mentioned, we need more data, we'll have data, we can use data to inform practice. I immediately picture the other side of that conversation that says, oh, I don't want data because then my principal will see data on me and they're going to use that for bad reasons. So or without the best of intentions, at least in some cases. So how do we get to a place where data is our support, not our enemy?
Well, if we're talking about video, you can use videos for self-reflection. You can share it with a peer, not with a supervisor or somebody who's going to fill out a form. All of that's still valuable.
It goes to policy and what it's used for. When you're sitting with teachers in a grade level team looking at student data and looking at the whole child and their needs, that is an exciting conversation, and teachers feel some agency over it. If I am being judged based on data that I get to give no context to, or using an instrument that I don't believe in, then it becomes toxic.
Well, and data isn't the answer, it prompts the questions. And so if those questions are from a place of true inquiry and improvement and not judgment, it becomes less scary. And I will say in Highline, we actually Gates has funded a big data redesign body of work that we're doing, where we're creating a student profile and a teacher profile, and really getting at sort of like what is it about this teacher, what is their background, what is their needs. So we're really trying to humanize the data a little bit in that way. And I will also say too that this notion that we have to, shove the data in front of a teacher to get them to care about what's happening to the kids in their classroom is it's a fallacy. They do care, and I think that we have to get back to a place of inspiration. When I was teaching my stuffed animals, which I did, and if you were a teacher and you taught your dolls or stuffed animals, raise your hand. See, it's a thing, okay? So when I was doing that at age 6 or 7, and then fast forward to being a brand new teacher, high school teacher, I didn't go to bed every night and think and say, please God, let me make a difference in the lives of 58% of my kids tomorrow, right? We went into this believing we could make it happen for every kid. That's what fires a teacher up. Let's play to that, right? I think that we have gotten to a place that is so uninspiring that we set timid goals that don't propel people to want to innovate and do great things. And we've also got to create a culture where people can innovate and fail without some kind of really horrible ramification. So I think getting back to a place of inspiration and remembering why people got into this profession to begin with is also hugely important.
When you all go home and you've got that person who is always talking about data, remind or re-ask that question, like, we have a lot of data. Is there information here?
Yeah.
One thing that we didn't really talk about is the fact that I believe that ASU is offering free teaching programs, like tuition free. And I think that we need a massive program for loan forgiveness for teachers to be able to genuinely achieve our goal of addressing the teacher shortage.
Yeah. Well, this has been a exciting conversation. I hope you all have enjoyed it. I think teachers, teachers are amazing, and when we think to the challenges they rose to last year and the year before, it's truly incredible. And we don't say thank you enough to them. So if you can do one thing, do that as well. But please thank our panelists, and we really appreciate your time today.